Pardon me while I have a strange interlude.
There is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art.
Along the misty corridors of time, and in those corridors I see figures, strange figures.
Welcome back, my friends, to the AP Strange Show. I am your host, AP Strange. This is my show, and today's show is brought to you by the Cosmic Channeling Communicator. This little device will help you channel cosmic entities and also record it for you and write it down so that you can become a prophet of your own cult or just for your own personal use, or starting your own TV show or podcast. There's many ways to monetize cosmic channeling. So get the Cosmic Channeling Communicator today. And on today's show, this is going to be great. I recently read his book that came out a couple of years ago and then recently came out again in a new edition, New Age Grifter. And there's a whole story behind that, which I'm sure we'll get into. My guest today is Joseph L. Flatley, aka Lenny Flatley. He's a freelance journalist and author, a filmmaker, a podcaster, the editor of the Failed State Update, and the author of several books, including a new one on Timothy Leary, which we might talk about a little, but I haven't read that one yet. So we're going to talk about New Age Grifter, and we'll see where it goes. So welcome to the show, Lenny.
Thank you, Mr. Strange. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, your book came highly recommended to me by Mr. Jeff Knox, and I thought it was really interesting because I consider myself pretty well versed in UFOs and cults and channelers and stuff like that. But I feel like Gabriel was really not on my radar, and I think that might be true for a lot of people. Um, so I guess the place to start here would be, how did you come to find out about Urantia and Gabriel, and what made you want to write about it?
Yeah, so if there's in New Age circles or, small new religious movements, I guess you could say, there's been this interesting American religion that's been around since the 1950s called the Urantia movement. And some of the things that differentiate it from other uh, religious movements, it's a new age kind of spacefaring take on Christianity, but there's no like central to the belief system or to the or whatever you call it is there's no hierarchy, no priestly class, no one at the top telling you what to do. It's like you're either aware of the Urantia book and you can read it and discuss it with fellow Urantia book readers, or you can ignore it or not know it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like but it's been a subject of fascination for a lot of people. I think that like Jimi Hendrix was into it, and you know um Jerry Garcia, like really this thing, it's like the size of a phone book. It's huge, and it's kind of perennially on people's bookshelves if they're into weird stuff or the strange, and
Hmm.
if you will, high strangeness. But it's kind of, you know, it's not super well known. Um, so, my awareness of it came through the fact that I'm a journalist and I lover of the weird. And one day I was at a party and my friend came over and was like, "You've got to see this music video." A friend of mine was in Arizona and he went to this like vegan restaurant, but the restaurant was run by a cult, and the cult leader was like a musician, and he's got this really bad band. So he was just like, Google Energy Master by Talius Van. So I Google that in YouTube, and this crazy music comes up. It's like it's kind of like smooth contemporary jazz, but like the lead singer sounds like Neil Young, except like he can't stay in key, and then like he's
Hmm.
got like this like and like the video is recorded in an auditorium, and it's full of like really pretty hippie girls dancing and stuff, and you're like, what is going on? There's like they have like a big picture of Yoda on the wall behind the band, and I was just so I just posted something on Instagram. This is 2016. I just posted something on Instagram just making fun of it. And I got an email from a guy and he was like, you don't know the half of it. You should really look into this group. So I
Yeah.
talked to him and it turned out it was a former member and he was a former member of this cult that this Gabriel started. And he called himself, he passed away last year, called himself Gabriel of Urantia. He based his movement around the Urantia book, but instead of, the egalitarian, non-hierarchical version of Urantia, which is like what the religion is based on, he used it as basically the lore or the backstory for a high control religious group. Um, and once I met this ex-member, he introduced me to this. Like I kind of became part of this community of ex-members who are all trying to figure out how do we live outside of a cult? Can we get justice for being mistreated? There's a lot of sexual abuse in the organization. There's a lot of like essentially slave labor. I don't
Right.
want to get to I don't want to defame anybody, but people work for free. They donate all their any money they would make back to the community, or they're on Social Security. A lot of them are on welfare, and that money all goes into the coffers of this community. So we have this compound in Arizona where this guy's living like a king. They have all these businesses. They have their own alternative culture with music and art and dance and all this stuff. A radio station in Arizona playing in Tucson playing their really crappy
Yeah.
music over and over. Um, and basically, it went from me making fun of some goof on the internet to being thrust into the middle of this ongoing story of like this cult exists. It's obscure. Nobody really knows about it unless you live in southern Arizona, and then maybe even then you don't know about it. But the cult's accumulating money. People are getting hurt, and it's like, what do you do with that? So I kind of sat on it, to be honest, for like 2 or 3 years, just because I couldn't kind of find the angle. I couldn't figure out what I could do as a freelancer, because the last thing you want to do is like tell a story when you're not ready and then have like five people read it,
Right.
and you blew your
Yeah.
sources. And then the leader's daughter escaped and um, she took about a year processing. And then after a year, she wanted to talk about her life. And so in 2019, I visited her in Arizona and interviewed her extensively, interviewed her boyfriend, who was another ex-member who's kind of like a big mover in the ex-cult member community down there.
Yeah.
And it turned into a limited podcast, and it turned into a book by Feral House, and the rights recently reverted to me, so I just re-released it on my own little imprint.
Yeah, and I mean, well, this whole story became something that really involved you personally. Like you're a
Hmm.
character in the book because you're
Hmm.
you're moving through and like meeting these people and coming to find these things. So it's really written from that kind of first person perspective, which is cool. It's not like detached from it and just writing subjectively from the outside, I guess, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
when you're a freelancer, you're an independent journalist. The stories you can do and the way that the stories are told are really dictated by your circumstances. I mean, I guess that's true for everybody to an extent, but like when you're under the gun and you're broke and you're trying to get across the country, it's kind of like I didn't have the time or the mental bandwidth to like do like a larger detached third person kind of like New York Times voice of God investigation. It was like very
right, right.
much me on the ground having this experience and relating. it to people, and which I think is fun. A fun way to read a book is to have the,
Yeah,
but
it's
yeah,
certainly engaging. I mean, it makes it a page turner because it's
mhm.
like you're almost like a detective, like a
Yeah,
private eye. Yeah.
yeah. After years of trying to get um journalists, like local Arizona journalists aware of what was going on in this compound, they finally started, like a couple in particular finally started like convince their editors to be able to like do stories about Gabriel of Urantia, and there's lawsuits and stuff we can get into when we get to it. But yeah, one of the reporters emailed me and he was like, I really liked how you know, how your book's kind of lighthearted because it's such a grim subject. And
Right.
it's like, but of yes, it is a grim subject, but it is not necessarily a bummer of a book if anybody out there wants to
Yeah,
buy it.
yeah. I mean, I certainly enjoyed it, and there is humor in there, and there is a kind of a lighthearted affect to a lot of
Hmm.
it, because a lot of it is ridiculous. Like, he's a Gabriel
Hmm.
or Tony, depending on
Uh-huh.
what
Tony
you
of
want to.
Pittsburgh. Oh, that's the other thing. He's from Pittsburgh. I'm from
Right.
Pittsburgh. So that's kind of like, I thought it was going to be really easy. Like, oh, this guy's from Pittsburgh. I'll find all his relatives and all his old friends, and I'll be able to like really get into the background of him. And believe it or not, a bunch of retired boomers don't necessarily want to talk about their crazy friend that went off and started a cult. So that kind of that didn't really work out, but
But yeah, you have a local connection. It's that you kind
mhm.
of both come from the same area, so that's crazy.
Yeah, that's why I was able to get into the cult. Like I visited them, and
Right.
it was because I was from Pittsburgh, and the the cult leader Gabriel loves talking about Pittsburgh and telling all these old stories about Pittsburgh, and 90% of them are bullshit, and he he
Well,
like,
like
yeah.
he tried to act like he was a street tough or something, right?
Yeah, oh, totally. And he was a little like chubby Italian guy with a bushy mustache. And I mean, nothing against Italians or chubby guys, but like being one myself. But yeah, he definitely wasn't like the Sharks and the Jets. But you hear him talk and he's like talking about pulling out guns on people when he was 9 years old or whatever.
Right.
It's just like, come on, man. But obviously the cult leader is compensating for something.
Yeah, or a number of things probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, that's where he kind of got his start as a musician, I guess, is in Pittsburgh. He was trying to make a life for himself. I think like this all boils down to he wanted to be a rock star, like he wanted to
Yeah.
be like one of the best musicians in the world.
Yeah,
And he just
and I
wasn't.
can
Yeah.
relate. I mean, like, absolutely, loved music, and like as a kid, I was always in like bands like all through my 20s and 30s, and just because I loved music and I loved the idea of doing it full time. And like one day luckily I discovered journalism at a later age, because kind of a late age, because when I started writing and it clicked for me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I should have been doing the whole time. Like I could tell the difference between what I was put on this earth to do versus something I was just interested in but not really good at, which was music. And I
Right.
don't think Gabriel ever got to that point. I think he had always convinced himself that he was going to be the world's most foremost pop musician, and like took that belief to his grave, which, I mean, what a sad way to live, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an alternate reality where he got a record deal and a hit for some reason. Like there was a producer that was able to like put together something good around his
Hmm.
music, and then
Hmm.
like he probably would have had some kind of career, and maybe he would have been happier. He would have been happier with
Yeah.
that, or like
Hmm.
bitter about it and had some other crazy story. But it almost seems like the whole cult is like a means to an end to try to get him to that point that he never gave up on that dream, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's all like wish fulfillment, weird stuff. So the basis of the cult is so he's from Pittsburgh. He 1946, I believe he was born, and lives in Pittsburgh. He's a like a street musician slash he's like kind of the two poles of his life were like born again hippie Jesus stuff and music making music. He he's in Pittsburgh. He has a daughter, he has a wife. He can't get a break in the music business. He's working these kind of like entry level jobs for like Christian ministries. And and then his daughter died, his wife left him, maybe not in that order, but then he starts to hear voices. And these
Hmm.
voices are telling him his name is Gabriel, um, and just throwing all kinds of stuff at him that he takes seriously. So now most people that's where it stops. You're
Hmm.
wandering the streets of Pittsburgh hearing voices for the rest of your life. He goes to LA. Now we're in the 80s and tries to, discovers the Urantia book, hangs out with the Urantia community. He's a laughing stock because he's trying to take over the Urantia community
Yeah.
essentially because he's such a big ego because he's a cult leader. Like he's going to be a cult leader. At one point, he actually was in Arizona and he started a Christian ministry that housed people and he taught them. And it basically was version 1.0 of his cult. Um, but then he gets into the Urantia book and the New Age stuff. And for some reason, that's when it clicked. He moves back to Arizona. He's living in a teepee in the mountains. Voice tells him he's gonna meet his past life Indian lover.
Hmm.
Because Native American stuff was really big then in the New Age community, which always makes me sad because
Yeah.
I can imagine being a Native American having to listen to white people tell me how it really is,
Yeah.
um, so to speak. But yeah, and then at that point, he goes from being a crazy guy hearing voices to crazy guy hearing voices talking to people who support him or are wrapped up in the um the drama that being a malignant narcissist, brings, like malignant narcissists or even just really outgoing people are tend to be magnetic to a certain type of person and fascinating to a certain type of person. And um, he went from listening, hearing voices to hearing voices and having people support him, like monetarily and materially and psychologically, and yeah, the voices are so smart, you're so smart, you're the leader, blah blah blah. So he develops this belief system over several years, which is it's the vocabulary of the Urantia book. So if you read this Urantia book, which I don't recommend. There's too much for one person to read in one lifetime, but it's huge and it talks about all the universes and it names them and all the planets and all the creatures and everything. And he takes that as the raw material for creating his own religion that largely comes through channeled transmissions or channeled texts. So
Hmm.
he's channeling, his wife is dutifully typing it up as he spouts this stuff and he starts a study group. Now we're in like the mid 80s, mid to late 80s. He has a study group of people around him, a lot of them like Urantia book people who
Hmm.
start following him. And this belief system comes together where he basically, the basis of the Urantia book is that there's this war going on between good and evil, and the war is going to wrap up at some point when good wins. And then on the various planets in the universe, there will be appointed leaders, and everything will be like this, like monarchic, utopian, New Age Christian thing. So,
Yeah.
like, and so Gabriel obviously is going to be the leader of America, of our world, um, which the Urantia book calls Satana for some reason. So I don't know. It sounds
Okay.
like Satan. I don't know what it's supposed to mean. But so Gabriel's in charge of planet number 606, Satana. And so what it boils down to is you had this he brought this community together that kind of alternates between 100 and 150 people depending, and they all lived in a compound. They all worked various businesses to make money for Gabriel, and they thought Jesus was going to return at any moment on a planetary spacecraft, which means a really big spacecraft. And when Jesus returns, he's going to assemble a government and Gabriel be in charge. And then all these people that are in this compound are going to have different leadership roles in the on the planet Earth after the end time. So like, you know, maybe I'm just like picking beans in the garden all day, but when Jesus comes, I'm going to be like the governor of Texas, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's like a really bizarre like confluence here of like people talking about these high-minded religious things and like a bureaucratic organization of like everything in this compound. Like they have like I have these manuals that people have snuck out for me that are like have all the documents of like how you're allowed to wash fruit and how like if you go to Safeway, you're not allowed to put produce in a plastic bag. You have to put it in a paper bag because God and all this stuff. And so they live this really heavily regimented bureaucratic life based around, but it's it's a cult.
Yeah.
It's all a mechanism of control.
Hmm. Yeah.
And they're still
And
there.
right. Um, and they're really good at remaining hidden too. So I
Hmm.
mean, that was one of the things that kind of surprised me. Like I said, I didn't know that much about them prior to reading the
Hmm.
book, and then I guess many people hadn't, but I suppose that's partly because they never did like a big uh like group suicide or anything like that. Like I feel like
Yeah.
we come to know about cults often because of like a big large scale tragedy that happens or something like that. But I mean all of the individual lives that are broken in various ways and trauma
Mhm.
inflicted and people being manipulated and taken advantage of is bad enough, right?
Yeah, oh for sure. And I mean, in America we have like our kind of pop culture cults that everybody seems to know about and which kind of makes you think that's what a cult has to be like, Branch Davidians or Heaven Gate or People's Temple, the Source Family, but there's so much more to cults. I mean, there's cults all over the place. They're
Mhm.
everywhere. We're not hearing about them. Like, unless there's some sort of splashy mass suicide or, the Ray aliens claiming they like, it's like if there's a mass suicide or if the cult is good at promotion,
Mhm.
promoting themselves, creating weird buzz over whatever, um, then you hear about them. And that kind of like clouds our perception of what cults can be. Gabriel would have loved to have been the famous cult leader. Now he didn't want anybody to commit suicide because he really liked his comfortable lifestyle. He lived in a mansion. He had, you know, the Dish Network and all kinds of
Mhm.
like Perrier and stuff. Um, so he was never going to go that route. But they tried. His goal was to be a famous musician, and it's like every time he got a little bit of publicity, it seemed there was massive backlash. So he
Mhm.
realized sort of in the like early 2000s that it's better to be a quiet cult. And so they started in northern Arizona. They were established in or existed established in Sedona for years, and they were actually called the Aquarian Concepts Community. And like the Dateline, NBC did an expose on them in like 1998, I believe, and they got they did outreach trying to like shore up the New Age community in Sedona. And then after this backlash happened, after people started realizing there's this weird guy with like three wives living, right here in Sedona,
Yeah.
they 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 changed their name to the Global Community Communications Alliance. One, I think, because it's boring. People
Hmm.
don't hear that and think, oh, cult. Two, because they decided that the internet was the next big thing, and then instead of being, strictly a Sedona phenomenon, they wanted to be a global phenomenon. And also they could see that the new age, like the Sedona version of like new age hippiedom was on its way out, and they embraced a more Christian message.
Hmm.
So they changed their name to GCCA. They moved to this compound in Tumacacri, which is nearly on the Mexican border. It's in the middle of the desert. Um, they bought an old ranch and then some adjacent properties. So now they have like 250, 300 acres in the middle of nowhere, and it's a small town in a small county in rural Arizona. So like there's not like the law enforcement, you know, they couldn't really keep track of what's going on in this cult if they wanted to. The current sheriff of Santa Cruz County is like some kind of like weird Muslim himself. So like, or
Hmm.
Muslim, Mormon, excuse me, slight
Right.
difference.
Yeah.
But so he comes from a minority religion, so his, um, or an offshoot of a minority religion, so his perspective is, hey, people can believe what they want if they want to live in a compound and waste their
Hmm.
lives toiling for this guy. God bless him, which, I tend to agree with, but you hate to see you hate to see people exploited, but also this is the United States. If you
Right.
want to be exploited, there's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
So, and that's where they stand today.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's useful, and you do this in the book, like right up front, is kind of make the distinctions between like what a cult is and a new religious movement and the popular conceptions of cults versus
Yeah.
destructive cults. Because I mean,
Hmm.
it's important to make distinctions with these things. Because I know
Sure.
there's a lot of sociologists over the years that have, questioned the usefulness of the term. When
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, one of the leading ones is and she's influenced me quite a bit. God, I'm so bad with names. I didn't sleep well last night. Rebecca Moore. She's was a sociology professor at San Diego State University, and she's well known in the field of cultic studies. And she gets a lot of flack because she rejects the terms like cult and brainwashing.
mhm,
Um, and her stuff is really interesting. It's really, really important reading, I think, if you're into this field. And she got into this because her sisters were like Jim Jones's right hand man in the People's Temple, and
yeah,
the family grew up in the San Francisco area. Her sisters both ended up in the People's Temple, and like Jim Jones was like coming to the family house for dinner and stuff, and the family kept a relationship. Didn't overtly like try to bring down the People's Temple or get their kids out precisely because they wanted to have this, they wanted to protect the relationship with their daughters, which is, so common among these. I meet so many people who find my book, find my podcast, email me, call me, who are like, I want to tell you everything I know, but you can't use any of it. You can't use my name because my kids are in the cult and I want to see them on Christmas and,
right.
and on their birthday. So Rebecca Moore's got a really interesting perspective. She's been studying the People's Temple literally since like, was it November 1978 when they all committed suicide? She's been
Hmm.
studying them like, as a journalist. Her husband was a journalist and she was became a sociologist, and they've been studying it ever since. And like her first book was like was called A Sympathetic View of the People's Temple, and it was very much, those people in People's Temple in Jonestown, they weren't idiots, you know.
Yeah.
They were getting something out of this. And Rebecca Moore was one of the first people to say we need to study this, like, and not just automatically condemn it, not
Hmm.
to support it, not to say that it was a good thing, but to say that there's something here to be studied. And you know, if you set blame aside for a minute, we can try to figure out what's going on here. Because if you don't have a well-rounded explanation for why these cults happen, they're going to keep happening. And has gotten so much flack over the years, called a cult apologist, the People's Temple apologist, because she dared say, "Let's study this group without uh, casting stones. Let's study this group um, without automatically going into blame
Yeah, and
and
judgment of ahead of time
judgment." Yeah,
because I
exactly.
mean it's more well known now, but generally people that join cults aren't stupid or
Hmm.
necessarily even gullible or naive.
Right.
There's methods that are used to ease people into it, and
Hmm.
I think you got to witness a little bit of that firsthand when you visited the because
Well,
the love bombing part of it anyway. Because it seems like that's kind of the entree, and the fact that people even know terms like that now is
hmm
a testament to the fact that studying it is useful so that you know
hmm
these flags to watch out for, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I use the word cult in my book and destructive cult, and precisely because I think it's a useful term, and also because I was documenting my experience with this subculture of ex cult members who were trying to come to terms. So I was kind of more reporting their,
Hmm.
that's what they call it, right? They call it cults, and they call themselves slaves, and
Yeah,
so in my mind that was fair, but one does need a more nuanced view of it, and and but yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, people think about cult brainwashing or these like techniques as if they're like taken from a book and
hmm,
studied in a university or something, but like it's really more about interpersonal dynamics. Like, I think if I think certain types of families and certain types of businesses are, if you look at that honestly, look at the dynamics, you probably have a good idea of how cults work. It's
yeah,
just, you just rarely have a Gabriel of Urantia and the CEO who like turns it all. It's like lightning really had to strike twice. Like, you had to have a guy like Gabriel who is of the personality to bring a cult around himself, and you had to have a group of people who are going to put up with it.
hmm,
Um, it's like, it's not it's not something completely out of left field. It's not something completely foreign to all of our experience, and it's certainly not anything to blame the victims for falling for it. Because like, you could have
yeah,
been in a cult, like, I've definitely worked at startups that felt like cults.
right.
It's just,
Well, yeah, and
you
you
were
see
one of the
that
lucky
now.
ones. What's
Yeah,
that?
you see that now in like the tech world where, they'll put these ideas out there like Roko's basilisk and, people form cults around AI
Hmm.
and like the coming what's it called? Damn, I'm forgetting the word for it now. But the idea that the computers are going to
Like the
over
singularity.
singularity stuff. Yeah, that's it.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
even like, look at Peter Thiel, like going on his weird lecture tour talking about the end of the world and demons and and
Antichrist and yeah.
Antichrist and all that shit. Like, I'm sure he's just so rich, and everybody's been telling him how brilliant he is for so long, that just like Gabriel of Urantia, he went down a slippery slope, and now he believes some crazy stuff.
Right. I yeah, and I mean charisma comes in a lot of different flavors, I think, right? For different
Hmm.
people.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
what some people see as charismatic, other people would find repugnant or just silly.
Yes.
And I think from my perspective, I'm always fascinated by channelers or claims of channeling. And that was one thing that seemed consistent even with ex-cult members is that Gabriel's channeling seemed on some level to be legitimate. And then you kind of mentioned at the end that listening to it, you're like, I don't know, it just sounds like his voice only maybe a little bit deeper or a little bit higher, depending on who
Yeah.
he's channeling, right? So,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
got a real Elmer Fudd kind of quality to it as well. And
yeah,
you know, but that speaks, I think, just as much to the psychological pressure cooker that these people are in. It's not like, I mean, I think this did happen quite a bit, but it's not always like Gabriel walks in and just starts talking to you in a funny voice. You've been conditioned. You've been going to these like ceremonies that begin at midnight where it's like there's no lights on, and then there's all these candles, and then there's like chanting for an hour, and then playing
yeah.
Gregorian monk CD or Enya or whatever,
And
and
you've been working out in the fields all day, so you're like
yeah, yeah,
tired.
you haven't
Yeah.
slept in a week, and now this guy's telling you what you're going to hear, and then you're hearing it, and then um Laird Scott, who was my very first contact in all this, the guy that reached out to me, he was the cult's audio engineer. So
Mhm.
like it was his job to record all these transmissions, which, channeling sessions, they called them transmissions, and record all the church services. And he thinks that's what got him out because it's like, while everybody else was just in the zone, he always had to have like his eyes on the recording level, in one ear, had to be like discerning, listening for like hisses and pops
Mhm.
so just having something to do grounded in reality during these rituals, um, he thinks kept him from being like fully sucked in where else. But yeah, it's amazing. Like you talk to people and they like, how do you think Gabriel did this? How do you think he channeled and became a different person? And there's like a lively debate that I touch upon in the book or maybe the podcast where like people are like, is he channeling an entity? Is he somehow schizophrenic and using a different personality? Like, but why is he such a like genius when he's channeling, but he's just like kind of like a goofy guy from Pittsburgh with an accent when he's not channeling? And it's
Yeah.
like, but I've heard channeling. I've met, seen the guy in person, and it's like none of that, like
Right.
I didn't see any of that. I just saw some goofy dude. Um, And I've talking to members like a lot of I've talked to a lot of people who have one perspective because they were born into this. It's like a third
Mhm.
generation or even fourth generation cult at this point. But also people that have like joined as adults and maybe we're only there for a few years. And it's like you talk to them and they're like, at first they like, all the houses of course had Gabriel's CDs. So like
Yeah.
you go there and you're listening to Gabriel's music, hanging out around the house, doing chores or whatever, and you're just like, I don't get it. I don't understand like why
Right.
this is supposed to be the greatest music ever made when it's just like bad,
Yeah.
bad weather report with Neil Young warbling over the top. And it's like, but over the time, it's like, well, this stuff's pretty good, you
Yeah,
know?
especially if you're not really allowed to listen to other things.
Yeah,
But
yeah, exactly.
um but you brought up something interesting just there too, which I mean, I think is something that's important to bear in mind is that yeah, when a cult has been around long enough, it's multi-generational and you have people
Yeah.
that are brought up in it. So you're talking about child abuse. And I mean, I think
Hmm.
this is where they ran into trouble as far as news coverage goes. And outside influences looking in
Hmm.
that the way that they cared for children there was not what we generally recognize as good parenting, right?
No, no. So this is something, this is like ripped from the headline stuff. When I wrote my book, I heard, and I covered it in my book. and I covered it on my podcast. I met people who were children there, so they'd been there their whole life, and there were caregivers and fellow children, maybe like a few years older than them, like sexually abusing mostly girls, not entirely, but mostly girls, and and it was like open season on these little girls. Like the abuse is, I won't go into details, but it's, in my book, and now it's becoming part of the public record. With but like even these victims I spoke to were very reticent to like go into exact details. And it was a weird dynamic because, you know, it's by no means like a sex cult in the sense that like, there's some weird teachings about how Gabriel's sperm can cure women of their problems. But like
Yeah.
for the most part, they're not like, Gabriel had one wife and then like another partner that he wasn't sexual with. And then, and everybody else was kept pretty strictly like no, no sex outside of marriage or relationships and stuff. But also the parents were concentrating on Jesus and his UFO and not paying attention to the kids. The kids were basically being warehoused, and it was like open season on these children. Like,
Yeah, because the kids were separated from the parents and usually
yeah.
watched by like one or two people, some of whom were predators,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
and they did nothing to check that beforehand or check it after it had been
After or
reported.
even when they
Right.
found out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have this like hothouse environment of abuse that really is only being exposed now. I reported it first in my book and in my podcast, and then now that several children who grew up in the community are getting out and doing whatever processing they need to do, they've started initiating lawsuits. So right now there's two two civil lawsuits for millions and millions of dollars that allege everything from sexual abuse to the eldership, the leaders of the cult knowing about the sexual abuse and doing nothing or doing insufficient to make it go away, and exploiting these children. They're not going to school; they're working in fields in 110-degree heat, and that's supposed to be school. Um, they're being abused, and police aren't being called. Like, um, it's absolutely diabolical. And there is one criminal charge, a child who was abused, just because, his parents got him out. So he is able to like go through the legal system. God knows what's going on with the kids that are still in there.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so after years of like nobody caring about this story, finally there's some movement as far um as like these children seeking justice. They also own a real estate agency. They have a licensed, real estate dudes that a lot of their money is in real estate. So like, you know, the cult, wants to be separate from the world and better than the world, but they'll get their hands dirty when it's time to make money.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it
Yeah,
is a grift, like that.
exactly.
Even if, I guess it's hard to know, but you have to wonder sometimes because, like, I get the sense that Tony Dellerba wanted to believe he was Gabriel because he wanted to be like a shaman and rock star, and
Yes.
but it's
Oh,
hard to know
absolutely.
how much he like really believed his own bullshit. Like, did he believe he was channeling?
Oh,
Did he
he
come to
believed his
believe
own
that?
bullshit. Yeah,
Okay,
like I mean that's one thing you can say like, and that's the power of being a malignant narcissist. He believed this bullshit and he was able to gather a group of people around him that believed his bullshit and still believe his bullshit.
yeah,
Um, and it's like, I think it's like with any belief where it's like maybe they don't believe all of it, or maybe, in the back of their mind they know that there's a lot of nonsense there or what, but it's just like someone that it's just like a Catholic who goes to church and like nine times, and they do the best they can with all the Catholic stuff, but there's just a few rules where it's like, that one's
Right.
not for me, you know.
Yeah.
I think I'll use birth control. You know, like it's that's the kind of compromise we're all making all the time, and that exists in the cult world as well. But yeah, but he totally believed himself and all his bullshit, and I think it was
Well,
a real
there's a
defense
huge
mechanism.
difference, I think, between like a basic faith and belief and like the belief that you're some kind of messiah, you know? Like,
Well, it's just a matter of degrees, right? It's
right.
like you have to be really motivated to believe something that bizarre, which he was. I think his psychological makeup was such that he was, we throw around words like malignant narcissist. I probably used it more in this conversation than I've ever used it in my life. But that's like a defense because, he was like a slightly effeminate boy who was interested in art and poetry, and his dad was like a steel worker, Marine, World War II vet who tried to beat that out of him.
Hmm.
So you start telling yourself stories. We all tell ourselves stories to get through the day, but
Hmm.
seldom are they worth writing a book about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was the chosen mouthpiece for the
Mhm.
Urantia, and it seemed like a variety of personalities. So like um
Yeah.
I was kind of interested in the number of voices that came through him, and kind of uh interested, and I don't want to say pleased, but I'm generally pleased when this happens just because it's a long time area of research for me. He was briefly in Ashtar channel.
Oh yeah, I mean that was part of the yeah, if you read his books, Ashtar commands all over it. Like
Yeah,
he really I mean he basically just spent all his time reading every new age esoteric,
right,
interesting non-mainstream thing possible, and it just in the blender of his mind, he kind of spewed it all out into these like volumes and volumes of channeled transmissions. And they're kind of hard to read and kind of boring just because of like the bureaucratic Urantia speak. Same,
yeah.
but you do find some gems like, the Ashtar stuff. And he was very much influenced by like Hal Lindsey's late great Planet Earth and,
Oh yeah,
you
that
know,
too. Yeah,
yeah, building a community with survival in mind, I think was his term. Like he's
right,
been waiting for the Chinese invasion since 1976 or something.
right.
Um, and they do all that fun stuff. They got, stockpiles of food and probably gold and, they got guns. So I mean, they hit all the greatest hits of the American cult experience.
Right. And I think what that does is when you're just kind of reading a lot of that stuff and then just kind of regurgitating it in
Hmm.
the process of channeling, instead of looking at it as repurposed or stolen material, a lot of people that are inclined to like you anyway would find it rather confirmatory. We're like,
Yes.
oh wow, this other author independently came up with the same thing, so there must
Hmm.
be something to it, rather than, oh, he's just saying something out of a George Van Tassel book or Hal Lindsey
Right.
book or you know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Have you experimented with like channeling or automatic writing or any of that stuff?
I mean, very, very, very little. I
Hmm.
I find it fascinating. I would be kind of I guess I'd be kind of nervous to really try it myself, but
Hmm.
I used to do automatic writing in the sense of generating like surrealist art and poetry and
Hmm.
stuff like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
because the surrealists used to do that, automatism, that was
Hmm.
just a way of generating
Material.
ideas, so
Yeah.
I used to do automatic writing, but it was as a way to come up with ideas for poems and things, I
Hmm.
didn't necessarily think of it as being mystical at the
Yeah, I
time.
got really interested in channeling because of this, and I was like, I want to do it. I want to know what Gabriel is experiencing when
Mhm.
because I know he's not just making stuff up consciously. I know he's experiencing something, and I want to know what that is. So as a journalist, I learned how to channel, and I have like lots of like ridiculous channeled texts, and it's like, but there's a point where I like my bullshit detector is too strong.
Right.
I can't truly believe that anything I'm writing down is special or, comes from necessarily comes from higher intelligence. But there is a phenomenon, which I'm sure you're aware of if as you've done automatic writing, where like it just does not feel like it's coming from you. It
Right.
just feels,
Yeah.
and that's probably what he's tapping into, but he believes is bullshit.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and he thinks it's he finds things that are profound and valuable in it that
Hmm.
maybe one of the rest of us would look at as
Hmm.
nonsense or just kind of absurd, But
Yeah, and
I mean
I
that's
talked
kind
to
of
his. Oh,
I'm
I
sorry, go
didn't
ahead.
mean to. I was just gonna say I talked to his daughter quite a bit. That's an interesting story. But yeah, every once in a while, like, she follows me on we follow each other on Instagram, so I'll like post like a book by Manly P. Hall or L. Ron Hubbard. She'll be like, "Oh yeah, my dad loved that book." So like
Yeah.
all he was doing was sitting at home while people labored intensively and just read cool books, which to me sounds like the greatest job possible without, you know, if it didn't have all the other stuff, all the other
Yeah.
baggage.
Right. If you
Um,
didn't have to destroy people's lives in the process, it would be
mhm.
cool to just sit around and read weird books all day.
so so when I visited the cult in 2019, I had to go through a whole process. First of all, this is like a journalistic no-no, but I did it because there's no other way to do it. I called and I lied and I was just like, yeah, I'm fascinated, I'm fascinated by you know, your music, and I heard you have a religious community and I want to come visit it. And I told him my name was Michael Flatley because like the Lord of the Dance guy, I figured if they Googled it, they'd get like a million Lord of the Dance links and
Right.
then give
Yeah.
up trying to find me.
But that was
So
also like your confirmation name, so it
yeah,
technically
yeah, and it
wasn't lying.
actually
Yeah.
some truth to it because my confirmation name's Michael. My birth name is Flatley.
I really
And
like that. You found a way to like kind of not lie, but you're still lying.
yeah, it was like such a BS thing. Like it was like the stories we tell each other. So I call and I have like two interviews with his daughter over the phone. And I had to send a picture of myself without glasses on. And I've come to learn that Gabriel is really, really good. Like one of his skills, like he's got a lot of like people manipulation skills that kind of border on like he had a real gift. Like he could like read people. He could manipulate them. He could look at you and know what you're about. And he even like looking at pictures, he would like look at pictures of people and be like and look in their eyes specifically and like get a feel for them. And the people who knew him, again, I don't know this myself. It could all just be just someone's imagination, but the people who knew him say he's just such a keen observer and understanding of people and how to push their buttons. And so I sent a picture and he spent a lot of time teaching his kids how to do that. Like he wanted his kids to be able to do that because he wanted to set up his kids to take over the cult. And so his daughter, she interviews me over the phone. I have to send her a picture, and she was like, "There is no way this guy is interested in my dad's music. There's no
Right.
way this guy, my dad, interested in stuff." And he told like his mom, and she told her parents and whoever, like, "Don't let this guy in. He's shady." And Gabriel apparently had kind of the same sense, but I think I kind of flattered him by saying that you know, I'm a guitar player and I play music and I love your music as well, blah blah blah. So I think he was a little flattered and also like I'm from Pittsburgh, he's from Pittsburgh. I think that was enough to get me in.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was pretty crazy. So I'm there for like, you know, half a day, three-quarters of a day and experiencing like the love bombing, which when you know it's happening is really kind of weird and uncomfortable. Uh,
Yeah.
Especially when you're like an emotionally distant Irishman. And eventually they were like they kind of rushed me out. And years later I was talking to a guy that like worked for the security detail for Gabriel, and they were like they finally found me online and realized I was a journalist like late in the day, so they like got rid of me
Yeah.
and didn't make a
Yeah.
big deal about it. But then, I'm like public enemy number one to all these people in this cult because my book comes out about them and my podcast. Then fast forward a couple years, Gabriel's daughter escapes, and now we're like buddies and we talk on the phone all the time. So this
Yeah.
woman who like tried to keep me out, now it's like, she's telling me all these inside stories about like what was going on behind the scenes. It's been a wild ride. It's been
Mm.
10 years.
And Gabriel's son is in charge now that he's passed, or is he still there at least?
All right, so the religious mandate or the religious teaching that they came up with was so they have this position, and I don't know if it comes from the Urantia book, if it comes from the fertile imagination of Gabriel of Urantia, but it's called the mandate. It's an office that's held by two people, a man and a woman. I don't know, matching polarities or some new age explanation for that. So a man and a woman are in charge, and it was Gabriel and his, Gabriel was married to a woman, but he also had another woman who he had three kids with who he kept around. So it's
Right.
like so they were in charge, and Gabriel's kind of the enforcer, and Neon, his wife, born Nancy, but now her name is Neon. She is kind of like more the doctrinal head. She writes like religious teachings and stuff. And when one of them passes, the the mandate is supposed to go to Gabriel's son and Gabriel's youngest daughter. And but they're not just going to be handed the keys to the kingdom. This is like a millions of dollars um, commercial enterprise, and it's been run like the real running of the things behind the scene, overseeing the businesses, overseeing discipline, overseeing uh, every aspect of life has been undertaken by this group of elders, and they're not in a hurry to hand anything over.
Yeah.
So Gabriel dies, in the back of everybody, it's supposed to be that Amadon, Gabriel's son, and Eleonora, Gabriel's daughter, are supposed to like take over. Um, but they have to be ready to take over. And I don't think that the people who are really in charge want to take over. So it's very similar to like um uh People's Temple. Like by the end of like the Jonestown experience and the mass murder, mass suicide, um Jim Jones was like non compos mentos, like he was like, or however you say it, he was nuts. He was a meth addict who,
Right. Yeah.
you know, but he had a group of really smart, strong women around him that kept things running and made sure that everything went according to his, you know, disastrous whims. So,
Hmm.
it's a similar
Well, I was
that
thinking that the other
yeah.
day. It was kind of like Heaven's Gate was similar, where
Yeah.
you Bonnie Nettles, I think her name was. She was kind of more running the thing,
Hmm.
and Marshall Applewhite was more like the face of it. So when she died, it was like he was lost. He was just lost at sea
Oh, is
and
that what
didn't know.
happened? Is that how it
I
was?
I kind of feel like
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I probably shouldn't say it on the podcast if I'm getting it wrong because it's been a while since I looked into it. But it did kind of seem like things really went badly when he was alone with it,
Hmm.
because she had
Yeah.
been such an instrumental part of being in the background and keeping things like running.
And that's when Synanon really went off the rails, was when Chuck Dederich wife died.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so so man,
There's a lot of parallels. It seems like a
yeah.
familiar story. I feel like the Rajneesh story was kind of similar too. You had like Osho, and then you had the woman that was
Hmm.
working with him, and yeah,
Yeah,
this is like definitely a dynamic where it's kind of like a
sure.
duo, but we tend to only think of the one figurehead, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and they had a house lawyer too, right? Like
Yeah, they have, well,
the
they have a lawyer that like they actually have a, I don't know, like a lot of this stuff, the book was written during the pandemic, and I think the pandemic changed a lot. Like a lot of their businesses, they were no longer
right.
doing, and how, like, believe it or not, I have better things to do than keep on top of the minutia of Gabriel of Urantia's business licenses. But
Yeah.
one of the one of the businesses they had or have is a uh, global family legal services. It's a basically immigration lawyer. They're in Arizona, so people are always trying to get their immigration status worked out. Um, and she used to try cases for them, like, they used to just use her for everything. But as far as I could tell, she's not a good lawyer. Like
Right.
one of the few videos, they were involved in a lawsuit in Colorado, and there's a video of her, just like public record video of like, a camera in the middle of the courtroom of like a case or a hearing. And Gabriel's lawyer is like it's like messing up, and the judge is like chewing her out. I think that happened more often um
Well,
than
yeah, she
not.
ended up losing them a lot of money on one of those
Yeah,
cases
yeah.
too, where they tried, I think when they tried to sue the news network that ran some, I'm not really sure which legal case it was, but there was one where they ended up having to pay out a lot of money, and I'm sure they weren't
Yeah.
happy about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And oh, I mean, when my book was they knew my book was coming out this whole time because one of Gabriel's daughter, who was my source, had kind of like she was having problems, like kind of like just just very hard to leave a cult. And she probably had some underlying mental health issues that weren't diagnosed. And she was, I would talk to her. I felt it was my duty to keep her in the loop with what I was doing, even though I knew that it was going to get back to the cult. And
Yeah.
so they waited until like, so they knew I was writing this book for a year, but they waited until the very last minute when the book was about to be published, and they started sending cease and desist letters to me and to my publisher and to any journalist any outlet that published any of my writing involving the cult. And like, it was just like nonsense cease and desist stuff where it's like, you used a copyrighted image from our website, just like not
Yeah.
substantive. Um, but yeah, they didn't use their little hacky lawyer. They got like a big player.
All right.
And like, and then they're involved. One of the lawsuits that they're involved in right now is a custody lawsuit, and one of one like they're a couple. Basically, the cult's real estate agent who's making them a ton of money. His wife left with one of their kids, and it's like turned into this custody battle between her and him, and the cult. Cult has a vested interest in keeping, this guy happy. So they're like paying all kinds of money to lawyers to try to, win this custody case. So yeah, they're not using their silly little in-house
Yeah.
lawyer for that. They're not only like going to the big guns, but they're cycling through lawyers. Like they'll have a lawyer for however many months and then, fire them and pick up a new lawyer. I don't know how much of that is the lawyers like reach a point where they don't want to,
Yeah, they get tired of it,
follow
I'm
the bad
sure.
advice
Yeah.
of the cult, because when you have a cult paying you to try a case, the cult is really running the case.
Yeah.
But also it might just be that, yeah, I don't know. It might be a delay tactic because it's like
Right.
you can really stretch a case out for a long time if you're swapping out lawyers every 3 months.
Yeah, and as long as you can afford it and your opponent
Hmm.
can't, Like
Hmm.
that, that's a classic move.
Hmm.
But yeah, it seems like they went after you strategically, or this book
Yes.
strategically, by waiting until it was ready to go to really mess with everybody. And so I mean, I guess the Feral House publication of it really it ruined all the promotion for that and getting it out there, right? So
Yeah. So we did have a basically the end result was there was no distribution for it. Like, Feral House was selling it on their website. Maybe they still are. They were selling it on Amazon, and that was it. Um, like there was a UK distributor lined up, and they bailed. Actual like whatever distribution stuff happens beyond just you know adding it to the database that Amazon draws from, like none of it happened. And I mean, it's very clear, like I'm an indigent freelance writer. They didn't go after me. I worked very hard to make the claims in the book bulletproof. I worked with the News Media Organization, which is a nonprofit that supports reporters. I worked with the Authors Guild. They
mhm.
they supplied legal help. They reviewed the manuscript. Um, there was nothing. I think they reviewed the podcast script too. But yeah, there was like nothing that they could go after me for substantive, and they knew that. I mean, if you go after me, I'm gonna declare bankruptcy and go back to work. Like I can't.
Yeah,
Like there's nothing. Like you can't get blood from a stone.
right,
But Feral House had something to lose. So
right,
unfortunately, Feral House also engaged lawyers in a way which I think was dumb. I mean, you always ignore the first cease and desist letter,
right.
just no matter who you are, because like it's nothing. It's like file a lawsuit if you want to talk. Don't get involved. What Feral House did is they got involved in a back and forth with, between their lawyers and the cult's lawyers that went on for months and months and months, and there wasn't even a lawsuit yet, and it didn't. And all it did was drain resources and pull the momentum from the book. And then eventually, I don't know who made this decision or what. I don't know how this happened, but eventually Feral House was like, fuck it. And they just put it out. And there was no lawsuit. Like,
Yeah,
there was no, it was like the damage had already been done. What was interesting is like the cult had like developed this weird relationship with like uh, the Honor Network, which is like a anti-bullying nonprofit set up by one of the fathers of the Sandy Hook victims,
right,
and
right.
like
Yeah,
convinced them that like I was a cyber bully going after these poor religious people just want to live in the desert and be left alone, um and that became a whole saga. I mean, it's fascinating what this cult can do. Like if you're a critic, um how they can go after you. They're just so smart. I had my book, once the rights reverted to me, I published it on Amazon because I was just in a hurry to get it out because the story's still moving and everybody wants my book. And I don't know what happened, but Amazon decided it was a copyright violation. They took down my entire page for like all the books I've published over the years. Like all my books disappeared from Amazon. I was
wow.
able to fight that and get it reinstated, but I can see now that I mean I hate Amazon anyways, so I've been migrating off of it for years, but that's kind of kicked my butt to do it a little faster. But I could, I'm sure that the cult was behind it
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
Somehow they
And
went
it,
to Amazon and convinced them that I was violating my own copyright. Like,
right.
come on,
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, there's ways to do that. I mean, you can
Hmm.
just flag things and report it, and the machinery takes forever to even review it, you know?
I
So,
know
yeah. Yeah.
if they ever review it.
Right. Yeah. So, Well, I'm certainly glad you were able to get the book out like on your own terms
Hmm.
because it landed in my lap and I was able to read it, and so selfishly I'm glad, but I'm also happy for you that the book is out there and for the victims of the cult
Hmm.
that are going to be able to have their story told on some way, and hopefully culminate in some kind of justice for them, right?
Yeah, I'm really pleased because like when it was on when Feral House was selling it, it didn't hit the market or social media or whatever you want to use. It didn't quite hit it, in a way that like guaranteed towards publicity or promotion and or fascination. And but it's important that it's always been out there because I get emails and calls all the time from people who are like, you know, my sister's in this group and now I understand how bad it is, or my mother wanted to join, but we found your book. So it's been an important resource, I think, for people who want to get out or want to know what they're in or who want to keep their family members from joining. But when I re-released it in, I don't know when that was, a month ago or so, um, it really seems to have kind of, blown up in an interesting way. A lot of people who I'm vaguely aware of, such as yourself, or who I've never heard of, um, are finding it and finding me, and it's, I think it's having its moment. So I'm pretty pleased with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's all good stuff. But as we wind down here, I guess I did want to ask you at least briefly about what you have in the works and what's coming up. But I guess the answer is probably promoting the Timothy Leary book that you released
Yeah,
in April. Um,
I mean, I'm always thinking about my next. I kind of an algorithm of like this experimentation with channeling and the Timothy Leary book. I'm kind of working on a Robert Anton Wilson-esque book about the nature of belief and how we believe and why we believe. Not like Michael Shermer's why people believe weird things, but like more from the perspective I've come to understand how, for like um the mechanisms of belief can be used in an occult sense, or they can be used in a commercial sense to like, I think, my basic premise is that social media algorithms are doing precisely what magicians do to um, create states of belief and identity that allow them to like have occult or metaphysical effects.
huh.
But corporations are doing it to us now, and it's automated, and they're not even aware that they're doing it to us, and it's awful. So that could be a really boring book, but I think I found a way to go into it in like a more playful Robert Anton Wilson direction that will be as enjoyable to read as it will be hopefully interesting. So that's like my main obsession right now is doing a podcast on that subject and then a book. Right now, I'm actually working as a private investigator, which is absolutely exhausting, and I don't have time for any writing. I barely have time to do podcast interviews, but as as my workload decreases a little bit, I'll get back to writing.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I mean, that does sound fascinating to me, and I look forward to reading your book on Tim Leary for people that are interested in that. What was the title of that one again?
The Occult Timothy Leary, and it's
Right. Okay.
Destiny Books. And then this one we were talking about is New Age Grifter.
Yeah.
It's now the new author's edition is out now, and it has all the updated material. The book originally came out in 2021, so this the new edition brings the story up to 2026. And yeah, and follow me. Failed State Update is the name of my newsletter. That's where all my updates and everything go, and I do original writing and reporting there. when I'm not an exhausted private investigator.
Right.
And that's you. And if you link to that, that would be great. It's lennyflatley.substack.com.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, so people can find you on there. And well, this has been a really great chat. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to connect and talk about this weird and important, I think, book. So
Well, thanks for inviting me. This has been great. And I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
yeah, for sure. All right.